data being used by the provider? Are they using your data in some way or form? Um, an Amazon Bedrock example is given here. Is your data being shared with other customers? So we need to be cautious when you are using all of this from a GenAI perspective. What is the source of data that is used to train the models? Understanding the ownership, the copyright challenges that are out there. So that comes under legal and privacy. From a risk management, I know we do not have a lot of time to go over the OWASP top 10, but there are existing threat model, which I mentioned, OWASP top 10. I would definitely encourage you to just go over it. It talks a lot about the 10 things, but these are the ones that you need to think when it comes to the pre-trained models. Uh, from a controls, uh, you can use specific foundation models, and they can be some technologies like WAF, which is web access firewall, or a data loss prevention technology can be used to filter out any malicious or sensitive inputs. So there could be fine-grained controls that you can access when it comes to data inside, or any LLM uh, that you are using. These are some of the guardrails. I'll probably skip this, which are there, and which you can implement as well from Bedrock. But for today's session, let's skip it because there is a lot that we need to cover. But from a resilience point, because it's a self-hosted model, the GenAI application is your application. You can be flexible on the compute piece. You can add EC2 instances or increase their capability. Uh, Reserve, or you can pre-provision some of the instances for static stability. The fourth one that we are going to talk about is the fine-tuned model. If you look at the diagram here, the user, again, inputs the GenAI application, which is controlled by the customer now. But in this fine-tuned model, all the fine-tuned data as well is controlled by the customer. It is customer's responsibility. So obviously the data classification piece, the data best practices on data, securing the data comes all under for the customer, because they are using their own fine-tuned model. I've seen a lot of banks and other places using this particular model because they want to tweak it based on their use case. And that's why they use a lot of fine-tuned model. Examples are Bedrock, you can customize models, Amazon SageMaker Jumpstart. They are some of the examples of fine-tuned models. From a governance and compliance, again, like I said, because the fine-tune model is the customer responsibility, you need to take ownership of the quality of the data and what your data is in there. That is customer's ownership. Rest, all of it remains the same, except, it's your responsibility from a fine-tuned perspective now, what data are you using. From a legal and privacy, what source of data are you using in that fine-tuned model? Understanding the ownership and copyright challenges. Uh, Fine-tuned model obviously inherits a lot of data classification that your company might be using, but you still need to make sure that it is exactly classifying the data the way you want it. PII remains common all across all the models. You need to avoid using any PII data directly into those models. And then you need to restrict access to the fine-tuned model given its data classification. You cannot give access to everybody in your company on that fine-tuned model. Again, risk management, threat modeling, and risk management is common all across, but there are some additional existing threat model that you need to work on when you are thinking about fine-tuned model. Uh, from prompt injection, if you think of it, you can actually craft a you can actually put a vague craft message to the prompt and get a different output on it. Has anybody heard of Air Canada GenAI blunder that happened? You have? Okay, for others who have not, I'll quickly go over it. So there was this person, his name was Mofat, if I'm not wrong. He went onto the Air Canada website and he typed on the chatbot that what is your policy if there is a death in family or a bereavement policy, when it comes to Air Canada fares. And the bot constantly replied that you can um, get up to 30 or 40% discount in this case, okay? Nothing wrong with it. So what he did was he had to attend his grandmother's funeral. So he searched for the flight from Vancouver to Toronto, I guess, which was coming one way around 800, $700. So he booked like the to and fro ticket. He went, attended it. And the bot also called out that you can claim this 30% or 40% discount within 90 days when you book the ticket, right? So he came back, and then what he did was he worked with Air Canada to give him a 30-40% refund, which he was expecting because the bot told him, right? So the Air Canada was like, no, that's not the policy. We are not going to give you a refund. And this guy took them to the tribunal court. And ultimately, obviously, there was a lot of to and fro and everything happened, but he was able to get the refund because the judge or the jury, what really they called out, it is your bot, it is sitting in your company, on your website. So you are responsible for it. So there are, if you search on top 10 or 12 GenAI blunders, you will get a list of them. This is one of the very common ones, which I think happened earlier this year, if I'm not wrong. So read about it. It's good to see how our models, if not trained properly with the right data, can cause problems. I think there is another one on Toyota or some car company where this person was able to get a car on a very low price. So read about it. It's very interesting to see. So from a controls perspective on scope 4, it's pretty similar, except now because you're using your fine-tuned model, etc., you can protect this model by using, the security foundational best practices. You have identity and access management, who should have control to what data, etc. Encrypting your data. That's one of the security best practices that we call out constantly, that even if your data is at rest or in transit, you need to encrypt your data. And then monitoring. You need to know what's going in your models, what's coming out. You need to constantly monitor it. Resilience, because it's self-hosted, you can be flexible on EC2. You can pre-provision some of it for static stability. Data management strategy. This is something which people are now asking. What does the cross-region data management strategy look like? So if one region fails or something happens, should we be able to fail over and get the same results through another region? And the last one is self-trained models. In this, as you can see, the light orange is all customer responsibility. So the GenAI application, the fine-tuned model, the foundation model, the training data, the fine-tuning data, and the custom data sources is all the customer responsibility. So this includes something like Amazon SageMaker, etc. So from governance and compliance, it is customers' responsibility. You need to govern and protect your training data according to existing data policy. You need to train the model that inherits the data classification for your training data. From legal privacy, some of it remains the same. Do not use PII information. Because you are the model provider, you must take on responsibility to clearly communicate how this data will be used, stored, and maintained through an end user license agreement. And then from risk management, threat modeling remains the same, but there are other threats that you need to take care of. I think they have probably covered all the 10 that I was talking about on OWASP top 10 because it's your model now. So you need to be concerned about everything at this point. Controls, it pretty much remains the same. You can use WAF or a data loss prevention service to filter out malicious and sensitive inputs, and then use security foundational best practices from identity access, encryption, and monitoring perspective. Resilience, everything is yours, so you can tweak it based on what you like. You need to have some checkpoints frequently during training so that in case there is a failure, you understand where the failure was, etc. So some of the key takeaways, I know this was a lot bundled up in 35 minutes, but using a scoping matrix, you need to drive some of the security conversations within your organization. What model is best for you, whether it's scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, 4, or 5. Again, like I said, what I'm saying right now today might not be 100% true in 3 months or 6 months down the line because it's an evolving space when it comes to laws, regulations, and threats, right? So there might be a lot changing. Ron, how much time do I have more? 5 minutes. Okay, cool. So I will quickly cover this. What do we mean by Gen AI for security? So if you think how there were some folks, like I said, they said, we are going to outright just ban Gen AI. Is that the right thing to do? Like we said, no, it's not. Because what you can do is now you can actually use Gen AI to make your SOC teams more readily available for incident response. You can do proactive threat modeling, etc. So which we call automate the mundane. So the reactive approach was, we used to summarize threat intelligence, we used to simplify a lot of reporting, etc. We used to create playbooks that we used to test in an incident response if this something like that happens, writing some detection rules and having a guided investigation. But when we think about proactive, you can think about automated patching. If there is a vulnerability out there, there should be a way on how many systems are impacted by that vulnerability. There should be a system which identifies all the systems impacted, a patch, and obviously there would be a consent that would be taken from the customer, but this is what it is. And then you should be automatically, you can patch that vulnerability or the software. Uh, Automate sensitive data discovery. If there is a sensitive data in any of your S3 buckets or any systems that you're using, you should be able to automatically detect that and understand it. Automate incident response. It is more of a lot more manual process when you think of it at this point for some of the companies where what they do is there are different teams sitting in each one of the scope. If you think of the NIST framework on incident response, where they see if there is an incident, what happened the last time. So there is a lot of manual process. You can automate a lot of it by automating some of the playbooks. If this happens, we have seen this in the past, these are the actions we need to take from Gen AI. And then deeper threat hunting insights. You can get remediations to, if you see a threat, what the remediation should look like. And then predictive threat modeling. This is another space which I have seen evolving, where customers want to use Gen AI to predict, based on the threats that they see all over, not just their system. They want to predict what the impact would be. They want to understand how can we remediate from this threat if this happens in our environment. So this is still a very evolving space when it comes to predictive threat modeling. Um, let's Let's talk about a little bit on safety when using Gen AI. Obviously, again, like I said, it's constantly evolving, it's new, but there are bad actors which are out there who are looking for us to make a mistake and take advantage of that. So some of this is from Amazon perspective, there is a fairness consideration. So there are two things which I really want you guys, whenever you have time to read about, or maybe for the next session we can cover, is OWASP Top 10 and Responsible AI. So these models that are highlighted here talk about, how responsible AI should be and how it is embedded within this. For example, when you are building your generative AI apps, it brings obviously new challenges, and some of the challenges are highlighted. Undesirable and irrelevant topics. Unresponsible AI touches upon all these, how should you take care of it? So I would definitely encourage you to just go over it. But this is just an example how some of Amazon's foundation models already have built-in protection when it comes to toxic data or biased data. Okay, so this is the last one. I have added a lot of resources for you to go over whenever you have time and bandwidth. The first one is obviously the one that we covered about securing GenAI. There is a blog post out there that you can read if you're interested. And then the second one is also pretty similar, but it talks more on the data compliance and privacy consideration perspective. And the third one is applying relevant security controls. And the last one is designing GenAI workloads for resilience.